Good morning from the Beely Inn. We went and had an amazing breakfast this morning, and then it was off to Chatsworth for promptly when it opened at 10 o'clock, and we were the first two people through the doors. It was a delight. Located just 4 miles northeast of Bakewell, it has belonged to the Cavendish family since 1549 and stands on the east bank of the River Derwent. Bess of Hardwicke began to build the new Chatsworth house in 1553. She selected a site near the river, which was drained by digging a series of reservoirs which doubled as fish ponds. Bess finished the house in the 1560s and lived there with her fourth husband, George Talbot, the sixth Earl of Shrewsbury. And in 1568, Shrewsbury was entrusted with the custody of Mary Queen of Scots and brought his prisoner to Chatsworth several times from the 1570s onwards. She was lodged in the apartment now known as the Queen of Scots Rooms, which is on the top floor above the Great Hall and faces onto the inner courtyard. Both accomplished needlewomen, Bess joined Queen Mary at Chatsworth for extended periods of time, during which they worked together on the Augsburg hangings. In 1584, Bess of Hardwicke added the hunting tower to the estate, which if you go back to one of my videos from 2022, you will get to see what that looks like on the inside, because it was amazing when we stayed there. Okay, Bess died in 1608 and Chatsworth was passed to her eldest son Henry, and the estate actually was purchased from Henry by his brother William Cavendish, the first Earl of Devonshire, for £10,000. I think he got a bargain. During the Stuart Restoration, William Cavendish, the third Earl of Devonshire, reconstructed the principal rooms in an attempt to make them more comfortable. However, the house that Bess had built was a little bit outdated and a bit unsafe by now. William Cavendish, the fourth Earl of Devonshire, started rebuilding the house in 1687. He then went on to become the first Duke of Devonshire in 1694 for helping to put William of Orange on the English throne. He initially wanted to reconstruct only the south wing with the state apartments, and so decided to retain the Elizabethan courtyard plan, even though it was very unfashionable to have this sort of a plan in this time period. The north front was then completed in 1707, just before he died. The second and third Duke of Cavendish, both William Cavendishes, made no changes to the house or gardens, but both contributed much to the collection found at Chatsworth at the time. They were connoisseurs of the arts, which are now included in the Chatsworth collection of paintings, old masters, ancient coins, art, statues, and even the current Duke of Devonshire is very into modern art, so you'll find a lot of modern art on the Devonshire estate. In the 18th century, William Cavendish, the fourth Duke of Devonshire, made great changes to the house and gardens. He decided the approach to the house should be from the west, and so he had the old stables and offices and some of the Edensor village pulled down so that they were not visible from the house, and replaced the first Duke's formal gardens with a more natural look designed by our good friend Lancelot Capability Brown. In 1748, the fourth Duke married Lady Charlotte Boyle, the sole heiress of Richard Boyle, 3rd Earl of Burlington. He was an accomplished architect in his own right and credited with Chiswick House, and upon his death a collection of architectural drawings and Indigo Jones' mass designs, old master paintings, along with many estates, were transferred to the Dukes of Devonshire. On to 1774, the fifth Duke of Devonshire. They really needed some different names, didn't they? He married Georgina Spencer, a famous socialite who gathered around her a large circle of literary and political friends. Gainsborough and Reynolds would go on to paint her. Her life is somewhat portrayed in The Duchess. The sixth Duke was known as the Bachelor Duke, and he was a passionate traveler, builder, gardener, and collector who transformed Chatsworth. I apologize too, I very much skimmed over Georgina Spencer and her time at Chatsworth. I've spoken about it previously, and you can watch The Duchess. There are books about her, there's articles about her. She had a lot of fun, and she was a massive fashion setter and trendsetter in her day, but you can learn about it. I believe in you. Anyways, back to 1811. The Bachelor Duke inherited the title and 8 major estates: Chatsworth, Hardwicke, Devonshire House, Burlington House, Chiswick House, Bolton Abbey, Londesborough Hall, Lismore Castle, and these covered 200,000 acres of land in Ireland, England and Ireland. So on to Chatsworth, he built the North Wing, which includes the sculpture gallery and the orangery, a theatre, some Turkish baths, a dairy, and a vast new kitchen and numerous, there we go, servant rooms. In 1830, he increased the accommodation by converting suites of rooms into individual guest bedrooms. The guest bedrooms along the east front are the most complete set from the period and survive with their original furnishings. The sixth Duke spent 47 years transforming the house and gardens, and in 1844 privately printed and published a book called Handbook to Chatsworth and Hardwicke, giving a history of the Cavendish family's 2 main estates, and was praised by Charles Dickens. After the death of the 8th Duke in 1908, the death duties were around £500,000 were due to the government, so the family sold off books, land in Somerset to cover these expenses. We honestly could go on and on. There's so much history and so many things that take place at these amazing places, but we can't say everything about them. Also, Hardwicke Hall, Bess of Hardwicke is responsible for Hardwicke Hall. Again, I've been through them. If you want to learn more about them, there are videos about them as well. So go back in time and find them. I believe you can do it. Having finished at Chatsworth, we then made our way off to Scawby Hall, which is still a privately owned home, and we went on a private tour, just Mum and I, with the guide. So, and also we weren't allowed to take any pictures inside, so you get a picture of the house and a picture of a piece of cake because we went to the church and had coffee and cake, which they do on Thursdays from 1 till 3 or 10 till 3. I had a piece of lemon cake. It was delicious. 10 out of 10 would recommend going to the Scawby church to get tea and cake. Anyways, so this early 17th century manor house has belonged to the Nelthorpe family since 1605 and is Grade 1 listed and is set beside a 3-acre walled garden. The house is an example of early Jacobean style with a steeply pitched gabled roof and a diamond plan chimney clusters. Inside the house are displays of Regency and Georgian furniture, Oriental and English porcelain, and a fine collection of paintings by Sir George Stubbs and Sir Thomas Lawrence. They also have on display a book by Stubbs about the anatomy of the horse, where he dissected horses layer by layer and drew out the inner workings of the horse, which then aided him later on to help make better paintings of the horse overall. He also had some portraits that he had done at Scawby Hall, and you can tell he's nowhere near as interested in painting people as he is in painting animals. So he went on to the right career. The Nelthorpes married into the Sutton family, making them the Sutton Nelthorpes, and later Sutton Nelthorpe went to fight at Gallipoli in 1915, bringing along his golf clubs, because you always need your golf clubs when you're fighting. Who knows? The house was built in pieces and gradually attached to each other over time, as originally the kitchen was not attached to the main house and was later linked, first by a single story and then by a double story. The main entrance was originally on the east side, but was moved to the center of the house facade in the early 18th century, only to get moved back to its original position a century later. We then had a brief walk to the church for tea and cake, as I said, and then it was over to Elsham Hall, whose gardens are open to have a traipse around with sheep and other friends who you can feed. They weren't impressed with us because we didn't buy them a bag of food. Sorry, friends. Then it was off over the Humber Bridge. Hey, look, we're at the Humber Bridge. And into Hull. The Humber Bridge was opened in 1981 and it held the world's longest single span suspension bridge until 1998 and remains the longest of its kind in the UK and is now the 17th longest in the world. And for those that like comparisons of things, I've chosen the Golden Gate Bridge to compare it to because it's a bridge that I have seen. Golden Gate Bridge comes in at number 24. The longest single span suspension bridge was just completed in 2022 in Turkey. So there's your bridge fact for the day. And then we checked into our hotel, which was the Old Kingston Theatre Hotel in Hull, and promptly went for this evening's activity, which I will be back to tell you about in a second, and you may, know too much information in a moment, but that's fine. So next on this evening's docket was bell ringing. So here's as much information as I can impart to you about campanology, the official term for bell ringing. I've no idea why really, but I've been fancying learning to ring some church bells, and somehow Mama arranged to make that happen. So thank you, Mama, and thank you, Roz at the Yorkshire Bell Ringers, for making this happen. So we met at a local church for their weekly bell ringing session. It happens on Thursdays, and then they go to the pub after practice. To start with, you don't actually just nip up into the belfry and start ringing the bells. First, you need to ring the bells up. So you constantly ring them until the bell itself and the clapper go from facing downwards to facing completely upwards. You can do this in peal form, you can do this together, you can ring them up individually, but they were rung up individually this evening. A note as well about the Humber Bridge, I don't remember if I told you this, changed in February 2026, so if you plan on going over it, you need to pay for your toll in advance. Not when you get there, you can't pay for it there anymore. Anyways, so lovely Olivia rang up the smallest bell. She's been ringing for about 9 months. And then I got to go up to the bells and see them ring up the largest bell. I had my fingers in my ears, so this is a warning to all of you to, if you have your headphones in, use your speakers and make sure you're not in a public place when you listen to this happening. So, word to the wise. So, and do have it at full volume. It is worth hearing. It is quite fantastic. Anyways, so once the bell is rung up, you can start bell ringing. Ringing a bell in this formation gives the bell the ability to ring 360, and the clapper, instead of just ringing back and forth, has the full arch of 360 to ring on and hit the bell, and it gives it a much clearer, crisper, better sound. I've included a diagram that you'll see in a minute with how we find out that the bell doesn't actually just keep swinging round and round and round. There is actually a mechanism to get it to stop. So there is a wooden stick that sticks straight up from the bell, which is called the stay, and it hits the slider. The slider goes underneath the clapper of the bell, and so the stay hits the slider so that the bell does not go just continuously around and around and around, but it makes it so it sits upside down. The stay and the clapper are made of wood, so that if there are any problems, they simply break, as it's way safer than making them out of a hardier material and something happening to the bell or the bell falling, because they weigh tons, trust me. So, playing bells is done in changes or methods, and ringers memorize and execute patterns called methods, which alter the order that the bells are struck in. And due to the different sizes of the bells, each ringer has their own beat. So you can't play to a metronome style rhythm, but the ringing of the bells goes one after another. So a warm-up is starting in the round, and so a round goes bell 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you're using 6 bells. If you have 5 bells, use 5 bells, but bells come in 6, 8, 10, or 12 sets of bells. But again, if you've only got 11 people, only ring 11 bells. And of course, as I said, they all weigh a different amount and have a different note attached to them. Then the band leader, yes, the bell ringers are known as a band, calls out the changes. So he will say 2 after 3, which changes the sequence to 1, 3, 2, 4, 5, 6. And then after a few rounds of that, calls out 5 follows 3, and it would then go 1, 2, 3, 5, 4, 6. There was a book of changes or methods in the tower that we looked at, and I've popped a picture of that in as well. It was all rather fascinating, actually, and very interesting. You can also memorize a set of methods and changes, and there's also like bobs and doubles. So a double would be like 1, 2, 3, 2, 4, 5, 6. The fluffy bit of the rope is called the sally and makes a huge difference on your hands. Here we are pulling up at the church where we're ringing bells. And mostly James caught for me and I pulled, or he pulled and I caught, if that makes sense. It's very interesting. So also, the smallest bell is always where they start, and the smallest bell is announced when they start ringing it. They were practicing for a wedding that was happening on Saturday, and the belfry is actually very well kitted out. They had a kettle, tiny fridge, various odds and sods. There was an empty box of Quality Street up there, some books, lots of signage about bell ringing and safety. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. They did tell us a bride who had been 45 minutes late for her own wedding the other week, and they were all sat in the belfry waiting for her. And there's no cell phone signal in the belfry, so They probably either just sat and stared at each other or looked at each other for 45 minutes. Anyway, so it was a fantastic evening. Lots was learned. And then we went off to the pub and then it was bedtime. So watch out for the bell ringing information and enjoy it.
Right, can you ring the tenor up, please?
So you can just naturally feel when it's going to sit upside down?
Yeah, bit by bit you sort of learn to feel, it's called sort of the balance point, because it's quite fine margins. If you pull it too hard, that wooden stay will whack against the slider, and if you pull it far too hard, it'll actually snap.
Right.
And it's actually a safety mechanism. The wood is designed to break, to protect the bell, because if it took too much of an impact, the bell could crack otherwise.
Right.
So it is designed to break if you pull it far too hard. But likewise, if you don't pull it hard enough, it's not going to make it all the way up to the other side.
Yeah, of course.
So it's gradually sort of learning the feel as to how hard you need to pull it, and you can then find that little point where you're able to stop it okay then. So yeah, these are quite modern bells really. They were cast.
1790?
Well, these ones aren't. The originals were, but they came down in the fire, the ones that were 1790.
Right, yeah.
So these were recast, a bit like in Tom Scott's video. 19... I think one of them was late 1960s and the rest were 1973, early 70s when these were sort of recast.
Oh,
so,
sorry, 1790, yeah, my brain
yeah,
was
so they're actually very, very modern. These really, yeah. There's a bell at the next village along in North Ferriby that they still ring, that's from the late 1300s, so they do date to that kind of age.
Yeah.
And that's about the oldest you tend to get, the 1300s. Yeah. But yeah, that's how it looks. Any questions while we're up here?
I don't think so. I'm just amazed.
So yeah, and as I say, these are pretty light really. They're one of the lightest rings in the area. So you can imagine sort of the size of the bells at some of the other places.
I'm amazed, like, it makes sense tradition of still having people do it, but I'm amazed it all hasn't been, completely
sort of taken over by
taken over by computer. You just like hit a button from your sofa, go, there's a wedding today.
Yeah, well, at some places you can. There's the odd place where it's automatic.
Yeah.
What we sort of developed, and those bell rings don't really like them, is Elicum chimes. And it's a bit of a different way of ringing where you've got a rope attached to the clapper underneath. So you don't have the full circle ringing, it's just the clapper that moves. And one person could just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. But it takes away the fun of it.
It does,
really.
it seems to, because I mean you've got your little like circle and...
Yes, yeah. So yeah.
And then what happens if someone's missing?
Well, we get different numbers on different sort of nights, so we get a few visitors here with a few from Hessel, which I think is where we were planning on going initially, but their time was out of action. So some nights we'll have sort of 4 or 5, 6, some nights we're up to 12, 13, 14 of us. But as long as we've got 6 to ring all the bells, we can do various bits and pieces. So. Churches tend to have 6, 8, 10 or 12 sort of bells. Cathedrals tend to have like 12, but yeah, we've just got the 6. Yeah. Shall we pop back down?
Yeah, we'll pop back down. Remember this.
service at Christmas. The carol service.
They're very nice.
They both do very well.
down.